I'm a big Star Trek fan. I grew up in the era of The Next Generation and was always fascinated by the possibility of exploring space and experiencing the technology that led to a post-scarcity society. A society that valued exploration and discovery over war and conflict. A society that valued all life instead of the tribalism I found rampant in religion. It inspired me to learn everything I could, to broaden my horizons. Which is why it pisses me off when I see those idiots at Little Light misrepresent and twist Star Trek into something to fit their religious propaganda. The guy we're about to hear from is Bradley Burnham, one of the newest additions to Little Light. You might remember him from Dungeons and Dumbasses. He expanded from regular pop culture into the realm of the UFO phenomena. He's a unique kind of nut, and Little Light hasn't really pushed his nonsense, but he is apparently their sci-fi go-to. Star Trek has been an inspiration to not just society, but scientific pursuits as well. The first cell phones, tablets, and personal PCs, just to name a few things, were all inspired by the futuristic technology in the original Star Trek and subsequent series. So what made me want to talk about this?
Star Trek is not a stranger to propaganda. The show's creator, Gene Roddenberry, says that the setting of the drama in space gave him the distance to address hot-button cultural topics.
This is what pissed me off to start with. Roddenberry created Star Trek in part as a way to talk about cultural issues, yes, but it wasn't propaganda. Remember that when the original series aired, there were a lot of equality issues and a conflict in Vietnam that needed to be addressed. What Star Trek tried to show us was what we could be. Much like Superman, which, believe it or not, these guys don't understand either, the show was meant to inspire people to be better and to aim for a better society where people would be treated fairly and not judged on superficial characteristics, where we as a society pulled others up to where we are instead of kicking down in the interest of profit or gain of our own, a society where all of Earth was united as a single people.
He would tell the writers that they needed to write without conflict, and that they would write about future, perfect utopian people.
Not quite accurate. Stories need conflict to provide stakes and a goal. The characters of the Next Generation series in particular were difficult to write about. At this point in the canon of Star Trek, the Federation was enjoying a prolonged time of peace with little conflict. Klingons were allies of the Federation, and Romulans were replacing them as recurring antagonists, and the Borg were introduced as a nearly unstoppable force, but the majority of the show would center on making hard moral choices, often in violation of the Prime Directive, the Federation policy of non-interference in the natural progression of a species' development. It was early on in the Next Generation era that several things became part of the canon. No personal wealth, for one. Capitalism was not a part of Federation economics. There was a sort of credit system in place, and the concept of personal property still existed, but basic needs were taken care of. If you wanted more than that, you could get it, but you would have to work for a form of credit to get it, which didn't count against your basic needs. As Picard points out in the early seasons of the series to a group of revived humans from the 21st century, and again in the movie First Contact, the drive of humanity is to better themselves and others. We've grown out of our infancy. The Federation would also make every attempt to avoid direct conflict, opting to negotiate instead wherever possible.
And what was the basis of this utopian future? A post-Third World, post-Second United States Civil War, and a one-world government. Although the Star Trek idea has changed slightly to include more drama, the premise still remains that the future society is what we are striving for.
I don't see a problem here. According to the canon of the Star Trek universe, it took realizing that there is so much more out there and that we are not alone for us to put aside our differences and change. In the Next Generation two-parter Time's Arrow, Counselor Troy explains to Mark Twain what happened in the past and his future. Within a century of first contact with an alien race, war, poverty, and disease were all but gone, and we began exploring the galaxy, bettering ourselves in the process. Now he begins to discuss the most recent series, Strange New Worlds. This series takes place during the career of Captain Christopher Pike, before Kirk became captain of the Enterprise. He's talking about the pilot episode, and I'll fill in what he doesn't address. The episode opens with a Federation ship in orbit over a world that is thought to be ready for first contact. a process that the Federation uses to let warp-capable civilizations know what is waiting for them outside of their home star system and what is going on at an interstellar level.
The plot is set in the future, and the premise is that the main characters are humans, technologically advanced humans, exploring the universe.
It's at this point I want to point out a couple of very important things. First is that they have failed to note that not everyone on the Enterprise crew is human. Spock, who is himself half Vulcan and half human, is a prominent character in the pilot. Secondly, it is apparent to me that they had to have watched the pilot in its entirety, if not key clips, and cut out important bits with crucial context deliberately. In other words, they are lying, as they always do, about the message being conveyed in the plot of the story. As an example of this,
these humans found a planet full of aliens that was basically about as technologically advanced as our societies today, making the audience of this show identify with the planet of aliens instead of the technologically advanced main characters.
This in itself is a lie, but not the only one they will tell. By its very nature, Star Trek has us identifying with the crew of the ship, not the random races of aliens that are encountered. Now, are there parallels between the alien race and our own world being shown and discussed? Yeah. Star Trek has literally always done that. The audience is looking at this from the perspective of the Enterprise crew, though, because that is the focal point. How humans that have canonically been through some shit react to an alien civilization about to make the same mistakes we do in the canon. Anyway, we go from there to the home of Captain Pike.
The very first scenes are supplanting the desire in us to meet a being from a far distant galaxy that comes to Earth to share its knowledge. For character building, we flash to a small cottage where the captain is watching the movie called The Day the Earth Stood Still.
This is kind of a Chekhov's gun sort of kind of thing. The idea that an advanced alien race is going to address the people of a less advanced society is planted and paid off later. The message, however, is very different. In The Day the Earth Stood Still, the warning comes as a threat of destruction. What Pike does plays out differently.
His superior proceeds to convince him, the main character, to help in a first contact scenario where the 21st century aliens on another planet created a planet-altering bomb that could disrupt space and time.
These people have not built a warp drive. Based on these readings, they have built a warp bomb.
You're mashing two events that are as yet unrelated together. The Admiral asked Pike to investigate what happened to Pike's first officer, who went to establish first contact and hasn't been heard from since. The warp bomb doesn't even come into the plot until after they've reached the world in question. All Starfleet knows is that they've lost contact with a ship dispatched to make first contact. The warp bomb won't disrupt space and time. It will, in all likelihood, have the power to destroy the planet on its own. Warp engines allow interstellar travel. Imagine the power to travel faster than light weaponized. It would leave a dust cloud where a planet once was.
After a shave and a haircut, the captain reluctantly accepts.
This is missing the point, and I'll fill in the gap here because it is relevant to the plot. Pike is still in a state of PTSD. See, in Star Trek Discovery, Pike had to obtain a crystal that would allow time travel. Retrieving it showed him his future, and it ain't pretty. He is reluctant to get back in the captain's chair because he knows what his future holds for him.
The 21st century society that is obviously paralleling the future of Earth and giving sympathy towards the possibility of a future extraterrestrial deception.
We cannot interfere with their natural development. We cannot show ourselves
But
for
if
risk.
they've already seen us.
We cannot risk the possibility.
Well, so we just leave our people there?
Hardly.
Extraterrestrial deception? Look, I know you think aliens are demons, but you can't say that and then show a clip of Spock advocating non-interference. At this point, all they want to do is find their people and get gone in order to limit the contamination of a non-warp society.
The main characters decide to transform themselves into the less advanced people of the planet.
It's called a disguise. Remember when I said they wanted to find their people and get out of there? Long story short, they find the away team and get them out, but the source of the warp bomb the planet made is revealed.
How did they get warm?
We gave it to them, Captain.
And now they're using our tech to build a weapon.
They just wanted to crush their enemy, and we gave them the means.
Yes, there is a lot that was cut here, and as a result, a lot of context was lost. What happened was that during the events of Discovery, when Pike retrieved the time crystal, they got into a pretty heated battle about a light year away from the planet that they're currently on. Because of this conflict, the inhabitants were able to reverse engineer a warp drive, but turned it into a planet-destroying nuke instead of a starship drive.
If we leave now, every death that follows is on our hands.
We cannot further influence the destiny of this world.
Mentor, not Spock, we already have. Our only option now is to influence it well.
Chris, General Order 1 clearly states we cannot
Screw General Order 1.
They give them advice of peace and safety, but the world doesn't listen.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Pike tries to negotiate with the leader of the government to back down, but it does in fact initially fall on deaf ears, and before attempting to have Pike and Spock imprisoned, Pike gets a message to Enterprise which comes into the atmosphere and hovers over the capital, getting the attention of everyone. When they are back on board the Enterprise, it becomes apparent that the planet needs to be made aware of the potential consequences of what they are about to do. Little Light cut Pike's presentation severely, so we'll look at what they put up first and contrast it with the actual presentation he gives.
Hi. Sorry to interrupt. I'm Christopher Pike. My world is called Earth. And though it's far from here, my people and yours are very much alike. Though we were not always peaceful. This is Earth in our 21st century. Before everything went wrong. It's a lot like your world today. Our conflict also started with a fight for freedoms. We called it the Second Civil War, then the Eugenics War, and finally, just World War III. This was our last day. The day the Earth we knew ceased to exist. What began as an eruption in one nation ended in the eradication of 600,000 species of animals and plants and 30% of Earth's population. You'll use competing ideas of liberty to bomb each other to rubble just like we did, and then your last day will look just like this.
The show really doesn't give a clear solution on what happened beyond that, but the Bible...
58 seconds. I didn't cut any of what Pike said. That is all they included out of almost 5 minutes of his actual speech. As for him saying that a solution was not presented, I have two things to say about that. First is that he's lying. A solution was presented, and you will see that. Second, I do not give a single solitary fuck what the Bible says. You can take that entire book and shove it up your ass for all I care, because it's completely irrelevant to the plot. Let's look at what he cut out. Pike beams down directly between the warring factions. This immediately sets his position as a neutral party.
Hi. Sorry to interrupt. I'm Christopher Pike. My world is called Earth. And though it's far from here, my people and yours are very much alike. This is my world today.
Note that he apologizes to the leader he already met and introduces himself to the faction leader he has not met. He then divides his attention between them to explain where he is from and that they all share common ground while showing them all Earth as it is in his present.
Though we were not always peaceful.
This is where Little Light decided to cut. The scene shows an advanced society at peace, an indication of what this planet could achieve.
This is Earth in our 21st century. Before everything went wrong. It's a lot like your world today. Recently, I was treated to a glimpse of my future. It was not all I'd hoped. After all, what good is there in knowing your future? A friend of mine asked me that recently and didn't understand what he meant. Until now. I've seen my future. Let me show you yours.
It doesn't start out as more than protests and such, but it quickly shows things that spiral out of control into destruction. This is the Chekhov's gun that was set up in the beginning of the episode, though in this case it's more of a Chekhov sociology lesson.
Our conflict also started with a fight for freedoms. We called it the Second Civil War, then the Eugenics War, and finally, just World War III. This was our last day. The day the Earth we knew ceased to exist. What began as an eruption in one nation ended in the eradication of 600,000 species of animals and plants and 30% of Earth's population. Global suicide. What we gave you is the means to exterminate yourselves. And from the looks of you, you're gonna do it. You'll use competing ideas of liberty to bomb each other to rubble just like we did. And then your last day will look just like this.
Pretty sobering, really. Putting numbers and figures to a global devastation. This is being broadcast to everyone on the planet as well, so the general populace is being made aware of what awaits them in a sense.
Perhaps somewhere all your ends are written as indelibly as mine. But I choose to believe that your destinies are still your own. Maybe that's why I'm here, to remind you of the power of possibility. Maybe that's the good in seeing my future, that I might remind you that right up until the very end, life is to be worn gloriously. Because until our last moment, the future is what we make it.
This is a guy that has seen and felt how he will become crippled and in a chair that he can only communicate through beeps. Every decision and every action we and the planet make has consequences. Our decisions shape the future, and they need to be good ones.
So, go to war with each other.
That's one option, but remember when I said there was another option that Little Light omitted?
The show really doesn't give a clear solution on what happened beyond that.
Let's see what that solution was.
Or join our Federation of Planets and reach for the stars. The choice is yours.
Reach for the stars. No threats of violence, no ultimatum. The choice is theirs to make. Do they wipe themselves out or grasp the future? To me, it looks like they grasp the future, accepting the challenge of exploration and bettering themselves, to allow themselves to seek out new life and new civilizations, to better themselves and set aside their petty differences in favor of a greater cause, to allow curiosity and exploration to take precedent over the divisions of the past. This is why I love this series of shows. It demonstrates what we can be, what we should be as a society and as a species, rejecting tribal instincts in the goal to better ourselves and others. That's what we need to aim for. That is the goal we need to have. That is the message that Star Trek has always had, that we can be better, that we can achieve greatness by working together towards a common goal. Little Light just sees this as propaganda to prepare people to bend the knee to Satan, and no, I'm not making that up. People like those at Little Light will bend over backwards to paint everything as demonic and satanic. It seems like it isn't that big of a deal, but it is. Conspiratorial thinking permeates everything they cover, and not once has any of them done more than look at the trailers and read the plot synopsis on Wikipedia. As a result, they don't see the character development or connect with the characters in any way. Then they make shit like this, which misrepresents the entire show by design. I have seen comments from people thanking them for lying to them. That encourages that conspiratorial thinking, and that is what needs to be stopped.